Welcome to today's live reading from Brilliant as the Sun, a retelling of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Mysteries of Creation by Krishna Dharma Prabhu and Chintamani Dham Mataji. Today we are going to hopefully conclude the second chapter and maybe begin the third chapter as well. Let's begin the reading from the second chapter. The Lord in the Heart. Chapter 2, verse 35. Remember, we were hearing Parikshit Maharaj asking questions from Shukadev Goswami, and Shukadev Goswami was speaking. Chapter 2, verse 35. Why is this so beneficial? Asked Parikshit. Shukadev explained that Krishna resides in the heart along with the individual soul. When we regularly hear and chant about Krishna, he guides our intelligence to see his loving hand always. Chapter 2, verse 36. Shukadev's eyes held Parikshit's in a steady gaze. That is why we must all hear about, glorify and remember Krishna always and everywhere. Verse 37, chapter 2. Then Shukadev looked about, addressing the entire assembly. The sufferings of human society are due to a corrupt aim of life, namely to exploit the world's resources for our own pleasure. The more we do this, the more we forget Krishna and suffer. The best solution is to daily and attentively hear the Lord's messages in the form of Bhagavad-Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. By doing so, material greed and lust will subside and the devotee will live a peaceful life of knowledge and bliss. When all the material contaminations in his heart are eliminated, he will no longer be attracted to anything unrelated to Krishna. Such a purified devotee will certainly enter Krishna's spiritual abode, Golok, to engage in his eternal loving service. For one who takes to this process of hearing about, glorifying and remembering the Lord, there is no necessity to perform the difficult processes of Ashtanga Yoga. Okay, there's a note which I wanted to read to you, which is corresponding to the verse we just read, verse 35. In this age of Kali, there is no other means for self-realization than chanting the holy name, chanting the holy name, chanting the holy name of Lord Krishna. This is from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, chapter 17, verse 21. So now let's begin. Chapter 3, Pure Devotion. Shukadev explains the different kinds of worship one should perform to fulfill specific desires and concludes by stating that worship of Krishna is always best, no matter what one desires. The narrative then returns to Naimisharanya, where Shaunak answers the doubts of some of the sages who, understanding that Sutta is about to speak about creation, want instead to hear directly about Krishna's pastimes. The hoot of a nearby owl rose above the raucous chirping of crickets. A gentle breeze wafted the scent of night-blooming jasmines over the assembled sages. Seated amidst them, Shukadev resembled the radiant moon surrounded by sparkling stars. No one left for their customary bath in the river. The chance to hear from a great self-realized soul of Shukadev's caliber was extremely rare, and no one wanted to miss anything he said. Chapter 3, verse 1. Sitting straight backed with one leg crossed over the other, Shukadev continued to speak. My dear king, as you inquired from me about the duty of an intelligent man on the threshold of death, so I have answered. Mystified as to why anyone would practice anything other than the simple and all auspicious process of bhakti, Parikshit asked, O Master, since there is so much benefit in directly worshipping the Supreme Lord, why does everyone not take to this path? Chapter 3, verses 2 to 9. Because they are foolish, replied Shukadev, with no trace of malice. Unintelligent people think that satisfying their desires for wealth, strength, sex, health, progeny, and so on up to the impersonal liberation will make them happy. Therefore, the Vedas recommend that they worship the subordinate gods. He presented a detailed list of which god to worship for the fulfillment of particular desires. As Parikshit listened, he was reminded of another of Krishna's teachings he had learned as a young prince. Those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires worship the gods. Such people are foolish, for the benefits they enjoy are limited and temporary. You can see Bhagavad-Gita as it is, chapter 7, verse 20 and 23 if you want some more information. So, a great sadness overcame Parikshit. Most people hankered either for the fulfillment of material desires or for liberation. Very few understood that loving service to Krishna is the greatest gain. Were they condemned? Chapter 3, verse 10. Understanding his mind, Shukadev smiled. Desiring enjoyment or liberation does not disqualify one from worshipping Krishna and attaining his eternal spiritual kingdom. When people come to understand that God's ability to award benedictions depends upon Krishna's sanction, they will begin to worship him to fulfill their desires, especially as it is much easier than worshipping the gods. The processes of hearing about Krishna, glorifying him, and remembering him are so powerful that regardless of one's initial motive, divine love will gradually awaken. How will materialists with no faith in Krishna take to bhakti? Chapter 3, verses 11 and 12, Shukadev said, if they are fortunate enough to hear from Krishna's pure devotee, then faith in him and his devotional service will awaken their hearts. Pure devotees are attractive since they are always in transcendental ecstasy. In their association, others can also experience this sublime joy. By continually hearing from a pure devotee, they will gradually realize their eternal relationship with the Lord. This is so satisfying that it creates detachment from all worldly talk and work. How can such devotees be identified? The first symptom of pure devotion is disinterest in mundane subjects. For a pure devotee, all worldly activities, whether social, political, or whatever, become unattractive. In a more what to speak of relatives, such a person is never agitated, rising above material suffering. Do all advanced devotees renounce the world? Asked Parikshit. Although they are not attracted to material enjoyment to preach, they sometimes work in this world of Krishna's pleasure, for Krishna's pleasure, just to show others how to use everything in his service. Sutta paused in his narration. His eyes were closed and his body slightly trembled with spiritual ecstasy. The thousands of sages who had assembled in Naimisharanya to hear him speak sat in expectant silence. Sacrificial fires crackled nearby and breeze rustled through the trees. Wisps of smoke drifted on the warm afternoon air, carrying the scent of the burning ghee-soaked kindling. Somewhere in the deep forest a tiger growled, but the sages paid it no heed. They only wanted to hear Sutta speak. When some minutes had passed, Sutta opened his eyes and said, "What more would you like to know?" Chapter 3, verse 13, Shaunak said, "It is evident that Shukadev Goswami is highly learned, for he expertly answered the king's questions. Please tell us what else Parikshit asked." "My friends," replied Sutta. Parikshit next inquired about the process of creation. A murmur of surprise arose from both Shaunak and the others. They had anticipated that Parikshit would have asked about Krishna's personal pastimes. Some called out, "We are keen to hear directly about Krishna rather than creation." Sutta looked towards Shaunaka, waiting for his decision. Chapter 3, verses 14 to 17. After a few moments, though, Shaunak said, "O learned Sutta Goswami, please continue narrating the discussion between Parikshit and Shukadev exactly as it occurred." I am confident their conversation culminated in talks about Krishna. Some sages muttered in dissatisfaction. The wiser among them, however, expressed approval. Raising his arms to quieten the great gathering, Shaunak explained his rationale. Parikshit is not only the grandson of Pandavas, who were all Krishna's personal associates, but he was also a great devotee. From his very infancy, he imitated the service of family deities by worshipping his own Krishna doll. The eyes of the sages grew wide in appreciation. This was surely the sign of a great personality. Shaunak then glorified Shukadev. As well as being Vyasadev's son, he is self-realized devotee of Krishna. Certainly, when two such elevated personalities converse, it will be about Krishna. Then sun's rays penetrated the thick foliage of the tree, illuminating Sutta where he sat upon his raised dais. Inspired by this, Shaunak said, as advanced devotees, they knew well that both by its rising and setting, the sun quickly steals away men's life, except for those who use their time hearing about Krishna. I'm ever so sorry, I think I didn't invoke God's presence before I started reading. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Thus Parikshit would not have asked any question that did not pertain to Krishna, nor would Shukadev have spoken anything unrelated to the Lord. Chapter 3, verses 18 to 30. King Parikshit and Shukadev Goswami fully understood life's purpose. They were not like the foolish materialists who are only interested in prolonging life, eating and enjoying sex. As enlightened persons, they knew well that even trees live long lives, the blacksmith's bellows breathe, and beasts eat and mate. Only foolish people who are no more intelligent than dogs, hogs, camels, and asses waste time discussing useless material subjects. Indeed, ears which do not hear Krishna's praises are like snake holes, and tongues which do not loudly glorify the Lord are like those of frogs, which make a great tumult and simply attract snakes to swallow them. Chapter 3, verses 21 and 22. Warming to his theme, Shaunak spoke with feeling. Self-realized souls know if a person does not worship Krishna, his wealth and position in society will only degrade him. The crown on the head of a powerful king is like a heavy weight that drowns him in the ocean of birth and death if he does not bow to Krishna. Hands, even if adorned with gold, are like those of a corpse if they do not serve the Lord. The eyes of the man that do not see the deity are like those of a peacock on a peacock feather, and the feet which do not walk to the holy places are like those of trees, for they will be cut down by the Yamduta's axes. Most of the dissenters bowed their heads, accepting Shaunaka's superior judgment. Parikshit's questions to Shukadev would all be important in understanding the truths about Krishna. Only a few dissatisfied faces remained in the assembly. Chapter 3, verse 23. Shaunak frowned. How could they not appreciate the importance of Parikshit's question or of Shukadev's answer? Did these ascetics consider them ordinary men? He continued, one who fails to respect Krishna's pure devotees is no better than a ghost who always creates disturbances for others. Krishna belongs to his pure servants. Only by hearing from such elevated souls can one relish the fragrance of the tulsi leaves adorning his lotus feet. We must therefore be careful not to slight Parikshit or Shukadev, Krishna's very dear devotees, by declining to hear their enlightened words. A young Brahmana rose to speak. Revered Shaunak, we do not doubt the qualification of Parikshit or Shukadev, but we wish to hear more about Krishna's personal pastimes this morning when hearing about his dealings with the Pandavas, Bhishma and Kunti. Tears of joy came to our eyes. We even experienced horripilation. Surely we are now ready to directly hear about Krishna's intimate pastimes. Chapter 3, verse 24. Shaunak's expression was grave. Do not think that these are the real symptoms of love for Krishna. On hearing about Krishna, a person may perspire, appear stunned, horripilate, stutter, tremble, become pale, cry profusely, and even apparently enter a trance, but still be a hard-hearted materialist, merely faking devotion. Someone called out, "O wise Shaunak, what then are the true characteristics of one who loves Krishna?" Shaunak's demeanor softened. Before genuine love for Krishna can manifest in our hearts, we must first become free of sensual desires. Another Brahmana questioned, "How can we be sure that we are truly free and not merely fooling ourselves?" One who has no worldly desires uses every moment in Krishna's service and is eager to constantly glorify him. A pure devotee is completely detached from material happiness. Such a great personality is without a tinge of pride, never thinking himself advanced. Now the last verse of this chapter 3, verse 25. When there was no further dissent, Shaunak turned to Sutta, "Learned one, your words are pleasing to the heart. Please therefore recount to us everything that Parikshit asked of Shukadev and all that was spoken in reply." Smiling Sutta resumed his narration. So we will continue from chapter 4 onwards. Thank you for joining. Hare Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.